Good afternoon and welcome to the CCA webinar series Exploring Customer Expectations in a Digital World that we're doing today in association with Concentrix. I'll be your host today. My name is Pauline Cochrane. I'm Head of Research and Partnerships at CCA and I'll be taking you through today's session. Just before we kick off, I'd like to just run through some housekeeping. Everyone's telephone should be on mute, but if you could just ensure that it is, then it just avoids background noise for other participants. That would be extremely helpful. There'll be lots of content in today's session, so please don't worry too much if you miss some of the points that are covered, as today's session will be recorded and will be available afterwards for you to review at your leisure. So please don't worry too much if you miss some valuable content, as it will be there. We'd really like your interaction today, so if you would like to pose a question, then please do so using the Q&A function, which you will find on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll take some questions at the end of today's session. If there's a particular message you want to send to myself through the chat function, again, it's on the right-hand side of the screen also. If you'd like to join in the conversation on Twitter, then the Twitter handles are detailed on the slide also. So I'm delighted that we have our expert guest speaker today as John Georgeson, who's Senior Director, Voice of Customer Analytics and Data Science at Concentrix. And John's going to take us through quite an in-depth slide deck of exploring customer expectations in a digital world, a really interesting view on some of the shifts that we're seeing and how we interact in a digital environment, different behaviours across different demographics, and lots of points I'm sure that you'll find valuable when you're trying to make your own decisions about your particular digital offering. Just before we kick off with John, I just want to take you through a couple of things that we're seeing through the CCA network that I thought might help us put some of this discussion into context. So, firstly, we did some research earlier this year about some of the challenges that our network are facing, and we asked the question, what do you think will be the biggest challenge you face related to changing customer behaviours in 2019? Now, we've got new research that's just kicked off this month for looking at 2020, so watch out for that survey link as well when it comes out, because we'd really love to understand any shifts and patterns as we go through to 2020. However, what 2019 told us was that the main issues of concern that you can see in the kind of circled area on the screen is about meeting expectations of quick and simple service, joined up service is the equal point that's come up at the top there, and then improving communication and information available to customers to help reduce contact. So are we communicating effectively and appropriately to customers in our base, both in a demographic sense, and to make sure that they know the best channels of choice to use for their particular issue, for their particular inquiry. And then, of course, less effort to resolve their inquiry or issue in the first place. So how can we make it a bit easier? How can we simplify things, understand where the pain points are in customers' journeys, and try to make those changes that will effectively enable better engagement with our customers as we go through into 2020. So we'd love to hear your opinion on what you think will change in that space as we go through into next year. So do watch out for the survey link. On the flip side of that, we also did a piece of research earlier in the year around what it's like to work in customer service today. So what are the things that our frontline teams are facing day and daily? And we asked over 500 agents to respond to what they think it's like to talk to customers, what they enjoyed about their job and what they didn't enjoy about their job. And probably not surprisingly, what they do like, their top three likes, is an overall desire to do a good job about helping customers, being part of a team, so feeling that team dynamic and achieving good performance. They come in every day and want to do a good job. On the flip side of that, here's what they find frustrating in their top three dislikes. Too much focus on targets, and perhaps there's maybe different targets that we need to consider and how that encourages the right behaviours. Using outdated technology, and again, this isn't necessarily a new issue that we've talked about in our network, but certainly one that's becoming quite frustrating if you're someone who's talking to customers every day. And really, it not being understood or appreciated that the job can be challenging at times. And I think that is growing more and more, particularly as we get into more complex inquiries and more challenging customer interactions, around vulnerability, well-being, mental health. So there's definitely a clear shift in what customers expect and what agents expect and how they engage with businesses, both as a customer and an employee. So that's just something to get you thinking before we kick off properly with John. So I'm just going to hand over to John, who's going to take us through the rest of the session. And please do remember that there's an opportunity to ask myself and John some questions at the end. So please do think about those as we go, and we'll get to them in turn. So John, we should hopefully be able to hear you loud and clear. And over to you.
Great. Hopefully that's coming through well. Much appreciated.
Yeah, we can hear you.
And thanks for setting the context for today. So we really wanted to spend some time exploring what's going on with consumers and what they're doing and how they're feeling about digital, and where some of that's affecting what choices that we make and how to design our service environments to best serve our customer base. So if you went out and you walked into any kind of networking group of customer experience and customer management executives similar to the CCA, you're not going to get too far in that discussion without talking about what's going on with everyone's digital transformations and how that's affecting customer care. Organizations have set some really aggressive big goals for migrating customers from kind of traditional live agent care to digital and automated self-service technologies. And it's not uncommon when we're out talking to, the analyst community, talking to our own clients, we hear goals like, we're going to reduce calls by 50 or more percent. We're going to take 50% of our calls, we're going to route them all to self-service. And that's a great goal, right? And we're going to see today that consumers want that. But to do that and create outstanding customer experiences, you're going to have to understand what your customers need and what they want digitally. And that's what we wanted to do with this piece of research. So the information that this is based on is a survey program. They were email surveys of it was a U.S.-based study, nationally representative, and we went out and talked to about 4,500 different consumers across 8 different verticals. And we really wanted to know about these 4 broad areas, right? How are they using digital today? How are they incorporating and want to use digital for customer service? What do they think about proactive communication and privacy? And then how is AI starting to affect and shape customer experiences in the digital world? So before we get too far into how customers want to use and do use digital channels specifically for customer care, I think the important first step is to gain a better understanding of general digital behavior and how that might be shifting over time. So where are your customers from a digital footprint perspective? Does age affect what they do? And kind of how are they using specific digital technologies that have applications to customer care? So simply, the first thing that we did is we went out and we asked them, how much of your personal and work time would you say are you spending using each of the following devices that you see on the screen here? Because we wanted to understand where digital usage is really concentrated, because that's going to help you design your care strategy. You want to meet your customers where they spend their time digitally. And it's clear. It's crystal clear. The smartphone is, and it has been over the past 2 or 3 years, this chart hasn't changed much since the last couple of waves of this. The smartphone is the most widely utilized device for digital access, more so than TVs, desktops, laptops. It's even tied with desktops now in terms of reported daily use at work. So think about that. People are on their phones all the time. And what that means is all of your digital design really needs to be mobile first. It's where your customers are, and that's something that we've emphasized for a while now. But I want to call out the more subtle pattern on this page, and that's that the digital usage landscape is stable. We haven't seen a lot of big shifts or acceleration in the past couple of years. except for in-home assistance, where we did have a 40% growth in the last couple of years as you start to see that technology and the Alexas and so forth, get more and more widely used as with Google Home. So what that means for organizations as you think about a transformation strategy digitally is that you've got to be very consistent and broad in your message. Consumers are really spread out. They engage everywhere, and they've often got multiple digital channels available at any time given where they happen to be located and what they're going to try to do. So if you think about that last slide and those digital channels, and break that down to its simplest form, really that represents one of two things, right? It represents either a mobile touch point or a desktop touch point. And by desktop, it's just website on the PC, chat on the PC, email versus, mobile web, mobile apps, mobile chat services. And so what we wanted to know is, where do they start? How do they choose where they're going to interact based on age? And there were clear patterns. If you look at the right-hand side of the slide, older groups start digital service by sitting down at their desktop. If they're 55 plus, almost 70 of them started by using their desktop. And desktops aren't dead. What we thought was interesting on this is even 45% of those 18 to 34 start their digital service journey on the desktop. So those experiences have to be great. Now, I'll tell you, I think a lot of that's driven by contact reasons. For harder, more involved contacts, I think they start on desktops. That's why you see it high even in the lower age groups. But younger age groups and those for simpler interactions are going to start mobile first, right? And 18 to 34-year-olds, almost half of them started, their most recent service interaction digitally on a mobile device. So they're doing that, they're staying there, and really it's 40% till the 55 and older age group. So you've got to maintain and have consistent desktop experiences, but you've got to prioritize your mobile capability and functionality because that's where consumers are spending most of their time today. And we also wanted to know how mobile payment is unfolding, right? To ask consumers, hey, what are you doing? Are you doing these financial activities more or less frequently or about the same as you have digital options? And what you're seeing, the charts, the percentages here are the number of consumers who've never done that. So you can see, 25% 18 to 34-year-olds have never written a check. And I understand from working with our colleagues in the UK that number is actually probably much higher in that age group in your operating environments today. But look at, some of these other numbers. 75% of them have used mobile payment numbers. 80% of them have used digital methods for transfer for Venmo or Zelle. So it's super high, right, particularly among those younger age groups. So as you think about payment functionality and building that into your digital properties and assets, your mobile applications, you have to have options and functionality for mobile payment, right? The more that you can build in flexibility in digital payment, the better, because that's becoming rapidly base customer level expectation. And as you're thinking about that and setting it up, really the evaluation criteria that I'd say to use is think about your process for billing and payments on your digital asset. Can you do it? Can your consumers accomplish what they need to with a single click or a tap of the finger? Because that kind of ease in payment is where you're going to need to be to meet consumer expectations moving forward, particularly for those companies not in the retail space that tends to lead there. So the other service-specific trend that we wanted to assess is customer messaging, right? Asynchronous messaging instead of chat sessions. So how widely has the messaging been adopted for customer service? And so it's definitely catching on. More than 1 in 4 consumers have used a messaging app for customer service. And if you break that down by age, more than 40% of 18 to 34-year-olds have used a messaging app for service. And this is really the digital channel where I predict you're going to have the largest growth most quickly. And I think a lot of that volume is going to end up coming from your more traditional chat applications. So if you don't have asynchronous messaging either in place or on your short-term roadmap, it really should be there. It should be high on the list. People like it. It allows for more back and forth at the customer's pace, right? They can respond when they have the ability to versus having to stay engaged in a chat at a more consistent pace. The other piece of this, and this will vary widely by geography and where your service operations are located, is where are they engaging today, right? So if we ask them, what apps have they used, certainly Facebook Messenger, of those people who had used messaging before for service, 80% of them had used Facebook. WhatsApp was the nearest, number 2, 30% had used WhatsApp. And then you can see that list kind of flows down after that. But even WhatsApp was at about half the usage rate of Facebook. I personally would encourage organizations to look at a variety of platforms, not just Messenger, given that we've seen a lot of usage drop in some other research in Facebook over the last couple of years. So let's move more into digital usage and customer care specifically, and understand, when do they start digital first? When does digital break down and lead to repeat contacts, and where do they go after that? We've got information on all of that from this research. One of the areas that I've been interested in over the years is really how consumers pick the channels that they interact within. And so we ask them, hey, what channels do you prefer to use for interactions? And what we saw here is there's a clear preference for self-service, right? 2/3 of customers want to and prefer to interact in self-service. If we ask them about their most recent interaction, the number who've actually used self-service was even higher. So 72% of people use self-service in their most recent interaction. Only 1/3 prefer agent-assisted digital service, and only 28% had used it in their most recent interactions. So if you give the consumers options and you make functionality available, they're usually going to prefer and use it self-service first, even for harder issues. What's interesting is the preference and usage gap is shrinking here. It used to be when you would look at these numbers, a lot might prefer self-service, but the numbers actually using it was much lower. And now those have kind of caught up and even surpassed that preference in terms of usage. And I think the takeaway from that is it's clear this is a marker for increased digital maturity. It's getting more and more likely that customers can self-service issues. So you need to make sure that you're keeping pace with enabling that on your own site in your own digital applications. So one of the issues is digital doesn't always work still. So whether that's due to functionality gaps or UX design or sometimes even, frankly, customer ability, when we ask customers about how often they needed a second contact in their most recent interaction, that number was 23%. So in about 1 in 4 cases, when they started a digital interaction, they had to have a repeat contact. Now, the good news is that that number of second contacts has actually trended down over the past couple of years by a few points. It used to be closer to 26, 27%. The bad news is it's still at 23%. And when it does occur, if that 23%, if they end up switching channels, and you can see here at the top, 80% of them did switch channels in their second interaction, that's actually going to decrease your customer satisfaction score significantly. The number's not on the slide, but it's going to drop your satisfaction or NPS scores probably 10 points. And usually if they do end up switching to a different channel, it's in harder interactions. So more complex issues, consumers realize that they're going to have to probably move out of digital to get the self-service that they need. Now, what's that path look like? If you think about that 1 in 4 people who need a second contact, where do they go? So we asked consumers about their pathing and where they went from a channel perspective after that first attempt to address their question or problem digitally. And you can see in the blue lines with the blue bars here, if they started with the website via PC or mobile, if they started with chat, their next step is typically going to be out of digital for a second contact. The most common path for those individuals was to move to live agent. And that's a critical intersection point to what we started with and Pauline talked about, is agents remain critical to solving escalations and failures in digital surface. You know, they're going to be essentially an escalation desk for digital in a lot of ways. Interestingly, though, social media, mobile app, and text and email didn't show the same pattern of trickling through necessarily the live agent. Those individuals stayed digital. If they started mobile app, they were most likely to stay in the mobile app for their second contact. They started text or social media, they stayed in mobile chat or social media. Email stayed email. And, you know, we're not sure what's driving that. I think that's probably a function of strong channel preference. People who are very digitally engaged may want to stay in those channels in a lot of ways. So my takeaway from kind of these slides is you've got to be prepared when digital failure occurs. That's going to lead both to live agent and digital agent-assisted volume. So that's one of the reasons you've really got to understand what issues are flowing through, where your digital breakage is, so that you can have your agent base really prepared to handle those types of interactions. So let's think about how do you get your customers to digital, right? You know, let's get them out of live agent care. If you know you can service them there from more traditional channels. And that's a big question for a lot of organizations who have these large call deflection goals. So we all know IVRs can be painful, right? People don't necessarily like them when waits become long, or the menu trees are very confusing, or there's an issue with voice recognition within the IVR. And there's a great opportunity here. And I think there's a great opportunity to create positive experience by offering them a digital deflection choice in the IVR to move them there. So one of the things that we ask about, we've seen a lot of organizations, particularly in EMEA, be successful with reducing call volume in the IVR, in live agent, by deflecting to chat or messaging from that IVR. So we ask consumers, what % of them have received an invitation when they called in to, hey, would you like to chat instead, or message, you know, leave your number or your email, we can get to you. You know, we saw that numbers as high as 46% had received a kind of messaging opportunity within the IVR, and half of them took advantage of it. So we think it should be a real bridge point in your channel strategy and part of what you're doing. Because one of the tenets of creating strong, positive customer experiences is you've got to give customers the opportunity to choose their own channels. And this is a great place to do it. Let them move to digital. Move them to messaging out of your IVR because they like to do that, particularly, you know, as you start to tier down within your customer age. So we also wanted to understand app-based customer self-service. How's that maturing? And I'll tell you, this has been an area that's been pretty slow to evolve. And not that customers don't use apps, right? You can see on the slide, when we ask them, most customers have about a dozen apps that they're using at least once a week. The numbers are much higher for installs. I think typically that's 30 or 40 apps on a phone. And what we wanted to understand is, how is this integrating with preference and usage within customer service? So only about 1 in 10 prefer using a customer app. 12% said that they did go app first in their most recent service interaction, and a little bit less than half actually have the digital app for the company they interacted with most recently for customer care. So that's a little bit lower than you might anticipate, just if you think about app usage in general. So we wanted to understand a little better what drives app usage. One of the things is suitability of the vertical for the app and app-based communication. Really, the easier the transaction, the higher the adoption rate. And you can see the industries that have the highest penetration, mobile telephony companies, banks, credit cards, are all above the 50% usage rate that they have it. Most recent interaction, the highest were bank and credit card at 21% and 18%. A lot of drop after that. And I think it's important to look at where they're viewed most positively. When you ask them how they rate it relative to other apps, the highest ratings on a top 3 box percentage were banking, credit card, and technology. Those were really the apps that were rated most positively. So how are they doing that? I think one of the things is to look at the contact reasons to understand what can be automated successfully in an app. You're not going to use it necessarily for a wide variety of contact reasons. You just have to do a few routine self-service tasks really well. And I think that's why you see the high adoption rate in bank and credit card, right? It's pretty easy to transfer money or make a payment or check the minutes on your phone plan. Those can all be accomplished easily within an app. So what I would do is look within your contact volume in the care center to see where do you have contact reasons like that you could very easily automate and do quickly through mobile, and then focus your mobile build-outs and your mobile functionality development on those type of interactions, because that's where you're going to drive the most usage and you're going to also drive the most positive interactions. So that's what we're seeing today as kind of key strategies within designing your mobile app for customer care. So, but let's talk a little further about that, because care's great. We want to have the best digital experience that we can when customers call our organizations to participate in it. And what we've seen is that everybody wants to self-serve digitally in their ideal world if the functionality is there. And the reason for that, and I think the preference for digital, is because it's quick and easy. The most important thing to customers is that they can get their issues taken care of when they have them, their questions answered as easily and quickly as possible. So, what's even easier than self-service? And that's really not needing to contact at all, right? Having a company that's going to anticipate what issues you might be having and proactively contact you before you need to contact them. So we really wanted to understand the role of proactive digital communication and how customers feel about that. So we asked them about their attitudes towards proactive communications and how they felt about it. What's their opinion about a few different areas of this? And I'll point out here that the chat that we're talking about is pop-up chat or proactive chat, when the initiation or invitation to participate is driven by the organization, or email, text, and personalized ads are the other things that we looked at. And you can see 60%, almost 60% felt very positively about proactive chat. That number's gone up over time. Text, not felt as positively about. Only 37% felt positively about that. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. I think there's some things you really need to be careful about with text as a messaging strategy. And then there really was a kind of a lack of positive feeling and a lot of negativity around the state of personalized ads today. That ties, I think, to concerns around customer privacy. We're not going to talk much about that today, as it's a little outside the realm of care. But again, it's something that I think you should be aware of that consumers aren't that positive towards today. So it probably needs some general revamp within your marketing strategy as a whole. Now, when we asked them, we said, have you ever used online chat assistants to communicate? Thinking about it, how was your most recent chat session initiated? which I think is really interesting. That's the yellow bar, the responded to pop-up. So pretty much at least a third of the time across all age groups, their most recent interaction was actually in response to a proactive invitation from the company to communicate on one of their websites or properties. That number is as high as 50% for the higher age group. So the other number that I would call out that I think is worth looking at is just chat as a whole is huge, right? It's over 75% penetration in the 25 to 44 age range here, all the way across on the thing. So everyone's using chat. What I think is interesting is there's a lag in that 18 to 24 group, and I think that's because that's the group that also has the highest rate of using messaging for customer service. So when I talked about starting to see volume migrate out of chat to messaging, that's what I think is responsible for that lower number in your youngest cohort using customer service. So everyone's using it. Older people are more likely to be responding to it on a proactive basis. Younger respondents are more actively starting chat sessions themselves. And we said, hey, if you haven't used chat, why didn't you? What's going on there? And mostly it's just they prefer other contact methods. So that's what we saw for 51% of individuals who hadn't used chat. That was the biggest reason by far. So we asked more about proactive chat because, you can see even a couple of years ago, only half of people felt positively about that. That's almost 60% now. So it's gone up over time. That's a trend that we've been seeing continue. I think older customers are warming up to it the most. They have probably the biggest growth over time in their opinion about proactive chat. And we asked them why they liked it or they didn't like proactive chat, because we really wanted to understand how can you get better at that. And what we saw, and we took a text analytics approach to it, and when they talk positively about proactive chat, what they like and talk most about is it's easy, it's convenient, they had a good experience, it's speedy, they got the information that they needed. But when they feel negatively about proactive chat, that was very interesting as well. So not a huge group, only about a quarter you can see here with that 25 and 23% in 2018 who are negative. But when they are negative, they're primarily negative around it seeming fake and robotic. They don't want to talk to chatbots. They think they're talking to chatbots in a lot of cases. And they find pop-ups annoying. So I think you have to be careful about that. So if you're going to use proactive messaging, you need to make sure people aren't going to be in queue, that if they're talking to bots, they know that, and they have the ability to opt out and do live chat if they want to. That's a good kind of set of recommendations for minimizing any negative opinions about proactive chat along the way. So what about proactive SMS messaging and text messaging? It sounds great in theory, right? Everyone texts. We all text all the time. And I've worked with a number of clients over the years who really had senior executives pushing text-based solutions for marketing and surveying in particular. And what we've seen is you've got to be really careful with this. Only 37% of consumers have a positive attitude towards being texted when you text them first. 33% were actually negative about it. So, less than 40% feel it's an appropriate touch overall. So what's driving that? What do they think is an okay way to be communicated with text? And we ask them to kind of list those. You can see them at the top. Appointment reminders, fraud alerts, shipment notifications. So mechanical notifications that are focused on things that are important to them or activities they need to engage in, those are considered appropriate for communication. What people don't want is marketing. They don't want to understand about product service features. They don't want surveys. They don't want ads. And that's where you really want to be careful, right? Everyone uses text, but from what we've seen, consumers seem to kind of view it as the last, what I was calling the other day, the last bastion of unspammed communication, right? They're used to getting spammed in every other channel, email, used to, seeing personalized ads everywhere on digital assets, but they view text communication more privately. So we really think that text communication, if you're communicating with your customer base, it needs to be related to a recent transaction that took place or is taking place soon. So it's got to be relevant content. It can't be something that could really be construed as spam because they're going to react very negatively to that. Now, the last one I'll touch on very quickly is proactive advertisements. The only group that really has any receptivity towards this is the under 34 age group, so 18 to 34, and even that number, only 40%, want proactive, personalized ads. A lot of negativity towards that, particularly in the older age groups. And I think it's a reality, right? We're going to always do personalized ad targeting on digital properties, but I think we need to do it well and, ensure that when we are communicating that it is about something that we think, based through modeling and predictive analytics, that customer really needs, that it's not something that they already have. The classic use case is when a consumer goes out and buys a product, and then you pop up ads at them for the next 2 weeks, seeing if they're interested in something that they've already bought, right? That's the classic personalized ad fail. So I think you've really got to be smart with your analytics around personalized ads and target them to what your customers might want versus, what you think they need via more generic targeting. It's not really a brand builder in a lot of cases today for customer experience. Now, probably the hottest area of digital self-service from both, just a general hype cycle and then a sales and marketing perspective from all the call center technology and care technology vendors, AI, AI all the time. So how do you deploy AI within customer service interactions? How do we put natural language understanding into our voice IVRs? How do we deploy chatbots in messaging in our digital properties to automate service? And we wanted to be able to inform this a little bit with a consumer perspective. It's something that you don't always hear. We hear our perspective on what we think you should do with it and the vendor perspective, but not the customer perspective. So what do consumers think about emerging technologies that are AI-enabled? What's their comfort level in using those technologies today? And that's what we ask a lot about in this research. And we ask them, what % of you have interacted with a customer service digital bot online to resolve an issue? And what % have done it with a chat bot? What % have interacted with kind of an interactive IVR system, a voice chat bot, if you will, within the IVR via phone? And, a quarter of them recognized that they had interacted with a chat bot on a website or on a digital application. Slightly more, 26% within the IVR said that they have interacted with a bot-enabled IVR for customer service that combines voice recognition to guide the interaction and get them down the tree. So not super high, but they know they're out there. They don't seem to be experiencing that often. But what I will say is if you look at the bottom of the chart, younger, 40% of 18 to 34-year-olds report having interacted with a chatbot. You don't see that as big a difference, a slight difference with 18 to 34-year-olds being more likely to do it in a voice response IVR as well. I think a couple things going on there. Probably the younger you are, the more likely you are to think and know that you might be talking to a bot within chat. And I think that's also might be the case that younger consumers are more likely to visit sites that are deploying bots as part of their customer service strategy. So not huge numbers today. Expect those to start going up pretty substantially within the next couple of years as we continue this type of research. So we asked them, how would they describe, how to write down, what would you describe your experience interacting with a digital bot as? And again, we went through, used text analytics to code them. About 43% categorized that interaction as positively. Thought the bot was helpful, it was quick, it was efficient, pretty good at understanding me. So 43% were positive about their bot interactions. That number jumps to 53% in 18 to 34. Again, kind of your emerging cohorts of customers are more receptive to it, but even then, only about half were positive about the implementation they'd experienced. 58% had negative attitudes. And what we think's going on there, when we dug into that, what we saw is it's really driven around limited functionality, bad recognition, poor recognition of topics and questions, just not having a robust functionality built out there, it being efficient, very limited. So there's some implications for strategy if you take those two pieces of information. They like it if it's good and it's quick, but you clearly need to have an easily available out to live support if the interaction goes off track, because they get really frustrated if they start spinning, if you will, interacting with the bot, and the bot can't help them. They need to be able to not have high-effort interactions with automated technology. The other thing that we've seen is you need to be upfront with consumers about it being bot-driven. Well, in the text analytics, what we saw is when they felt like someone was kind of misleading them, not telling them they were interacting with a bot, that led to very, very poor ratings, right? So you need to be transparent in your communications that you're not talking to a live agent in chat. So we also wanted to assess what types of tasks are most ready for consumer comfort, if you will. How confident are people about different types of interactions? And you can see listed across this slide are all of the different interaction reasons that, are kind of common tasks you could do with using a bot, right? So confidence was on a 1 to 10 scale, that top 3 box. So 32%, were confident that the bot would be good in giving them driving directions, 24% making a reservation, scheduling an appointment, but, confidence dropped below 20% really for anything complex or more difficult. So people just aren't quite there yet in thinking and understanding that digital bots can help them. And I think a lot of this is due to low experience rate with these technologies, but the implication here is just be cautious about your initial deployment use cases if you're putting chatbots in place. So it takes some time to build consumer confidence in integrating bots as kind of like a usual part of their day-to-day and part of their customer care routine. And I think the keys to being successful here are very selective deployments on simple tasks that can be handled via an interactive bot, clear identification of frustration points and building in easy outs to live support, not trapping them within a bot interaction, and then, frankly, making sure your self-service is as strong as it can be, right? Because they want to self-serve. They don't want to have to interact with anyone, whether, human or bot, if they don't have to. We know that people want to not have to interact. They want to do it themselves for the easiest path, and that extends to bots as well. So the final area that we wanted to touch on today is preference for IVR technologies. This has been something that, as voice recognition continues to get better and better, do customers want natural language understanding? Do they want touch tone? And so we just asked them again, because I think it's fascinating from a design perspective. And 57% of individuals still prefer touch tone IVRs. In fact, even if you look at it by age, voice recognition preference only jumps to 25% in 18 to 24. So I think there's definite benefits to NLU IVRs, to have voice technology. There's some great systems out there. Consumers just aren't clamoring for more voice-based IVR interactions on the phone, even though they're huge adopters on home voice interactions like Alexa. And the biggest challenges, based on what we typically see in our research and anecdotally, is that for phone-based natural language interactions, there's still a lot of challenges around information accuracy and voice interaction in the types of louder environments with background noise that people find themselves often in, whether it's in public, whether it's in open office designs. A lot of times they may not have, the type of clarity of sound that helps with speech recognition. So I don't think you should move away from it. I think it's got to be built into your IVRs. I just want to make sure that you also design in touch functionality for now into your IVR deployments. A lot of people today still want the speed and convenience associated with keypad entry. It also ensures they can enter things like account numbers with more privacy. So that's really where I wanted to end today in our discussion of AI. Absolutely we're seeing a growth in digital assistants. They're making their way in, but you've got to, again, just like failed self-service, make your live agents easily accessible, so when customers have more difficult interactions, you can avoid having high effort for them, right? You can get them where they need to be, to a live agent to solve their more complex issues. Today, people aren't that confident in bot interactions. Be careful in your use cases and make sure that you still have the ability to self-serve via touch tone in addition to speech recognition within your upfront screening and your IVRs. So that's where I'll end today. I'll open it up for questions now.
Thank you very much, John. Wow, that was a lot we covered in that short space of time, and I don't think there's probably anything we've left unturned at the minute, certainly for people to consider. So if you've got some questions that you want to put to John, then now is the time to do so. We'll start working through some of them. John, I've got a few that I picked up on as you were chatting. So I think one of the things you talked about kind of early on in the slide deck was about 2/3 of people want to use self-service. And I guess one of the biggest challenges with organisations is identifying the best and most appropriate, processes or interactions to push to there. How easy or difficult do you think it is to identify those pieces within an organisation? Those bits of the journey that you can push to self-serve easily. How do you think it's difficult, or do you think it's quite straightforward to do?
No, I think that's a great question. I don't think that it has to be overly difficult to do, and I think that's where, our traditional call center environments provide us really almost all of the information that we need to do to design that strategy. So that's where I think it's just so important to look at your call drivers, look at the contact reasons, what's driving your volume, being able to then take that volume, understand the relative percentage of each contact type, and then start to work with your digital organizations to really map those interactions from a customer journey expectations perspective and say, hey, how easy is this to do digitally? If I can do it digitally and it's, a high volume call driver, let's design that functionality. But I think it's taking that customer experience lens and understanding what people are calling about, and then understanding, what their experience is with that contact type to understand if it's suitable to move to self-service. And if it is, put it there.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that relates back to one of the things that, that came through as one of the big issues for this year with our network is, having that joined up service, having those connections across the business. And I guess it's a bit like any kind of experience or service. You can't just push things to that environment unless you know that that's actually going to work there and have that commitment and buy-in from the wider business as well, that that's the best thing to do for customers.
Definitely.
Yeah. One of the things that we've been getting asked quite a bit over the last few months, I'm sure everyone who's on the session today will identify with the fact that vulnerability is a growing issue across organisations. Whether that's from a customer perspective or supporting colleagues' well-being and dealing with, more challenging interactions. One of the things that seems to be more of a point where they're having a wee bit of difficulty is identifying vulnerable customers on digital channels. Have you seen any good examples of how organisations have been working on that?
On identifying their valuable customers in digital?
Sorry, vulnerable. So customers
the most vulnerable customers?
Yeah.
I have not seen a lot of that today. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen a lot of work around that. I think that's really kind of an evolving open issue.
Yeah.
Where are you getting asked about that most frequently in relation to, really which area?
Mm-hmm. I think probably a lot of the time you might think it's related to financial services, but sometimes I guess what can start off as what seems a fairly transactional call or conversation can then quickly be identified as someone with some other issues that are not necessarily relevant to the call, but the advisor then has to deal with if that person's in a vulnerable situation financially or otherwise. So I just wanted to ask you the question, given that we've talked a lot about digital, whether you've seen any good examples of that, but it's definitely something that I know our network are interested in learning a bit more about. So that's something definitely to park for the future. For me, another thing that was really quite good through the conversation that you had there, John, was about the whole piece around chat. And it's something personally that I've been using a bit more, just because it's where you've got good examples of it and it makes it really easy. But I wondered, I think it's interesting to see the growth in this, and I wondered, do you think customers have different expectations when using chat versus other channels? So will they only expect to be able to sort out simple problems, or do they anticipate more complex capability on this channel?
I think they expect more complex capability now. Mm-hmm. I really do. That's something that we see a lot. People view it as an assisted channel, and that really agents should have the full range of ability to solve their problems within chat that they would have within voice. And I know that can be something that organizations can struggle with this because of some of their privacy considerations, particularly within healthcare and financial services, with recording that information within chat. So you have to weigh that in, but customers do expect the ability to solve complex issues there. So I think it's something that you've got to figure out.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to that connectivity piece, isn't it? Where there either, I had a really good experience last week trying to make an adjustment on my car insurance, and that can be, quite complicated depending on, whether you need your policy number, all the different things that you need to know. But it was actually made quite easy for me, and I think it's making sure that, I guess, the same connections, the same capabilities available to people to use in that channel as well as they would have in perhaps more regular channels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, and I think another thing that I thought was a really important point, and I suppose anecdotally people feel about is chatbots. We're definitely seeing a bit of a growth in that, but I really thought it was important, the point that you made about for organisations to be completely transparent with customers that they're interacting with a chatbot versus, a potential illusion that it's a human contact. And I thought it was a really important point to make. And have you seen examples where that's let an organisation down, where they've maybe not been transparent about that?
I think we see it anecdotally all the time. Mm-hmm. Every bit of research that we've ever done on this, if they feel that They view it as a breach of trust if the organization isn't upfront about that, right? If they just say, the best way to handle it, and this is a simple example, but, this is Justin, I'm your helpful company Z, virtual assistant. You're letting them know that they're interacting with it, versus I think some of the first wave of this was more like, our AI is so good, customers are never going to know that. And that's not the reality of where the industry is today. So they would just be like, it's Justin. And, then customers feel like that's been a breach of trust, that kind of the organization's trying to put something over on them.
No, definitely. I think people are learning quite quickly where they've maybe made that mistake initially and correcting that as well. And I think for me it goes back really to customers ultimately want something that works, don't they? Whether it doesn't really matter which channel that they're engaging with you on, they just want it to work. And I think it was interesting that, you know, they will opt back to touch tone IVR. But then it's not really, I guess, that surprising because they're comfortable with it. It's been proven, even though sometimes, you know, people can get lost down an IVR, an IVR track. But it's ultimately they understand how it works, and I guess it's maybe a bit of catch up in some of the perhaps newer technologies still that we're working through that might be, you know, take us a wee while to get there.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, for frequent IVR users, a lot of times they might call that or contact that organization so frequently they know the touch tone path through.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have to hit 1. If I'm going to hit 5, I'm going to hit 2. If you, you know, to your point, you want it fast and you want it done easily. If you have to then go listen to and talk to the kind of, you know, chat bot all the way and can't just hit the keys, that's frustrating.
Yes, most definitely, most definitely. Okay, I'm conscious that we're getting to the end of our session, John. So, you know, as always, you always provide some fabulous content for us to go away and consider and think, and some really, really useful stats and facts and figures in there. So if any other questions come in, I'm guessing you're quite happy to take them offline. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we have been recording the session today, and the slide deck will be available afterwards also. So please don't worry if you missed some points that John raised through the course of the session. And it just goes for me to thank John for taking the time out. I know it's an early start where you're at versus the UK time, so hopefully you have a good rest of day. And I just want to thank everyone's attention and participation in today's session. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again at a CCA session soon. Thank you very much, John, and we will definitely have you on in the future in one of our other webinars. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Have a great day. See you later. Bye.
Bye.